Maurice looked around at the inside of the rat-catcher's shed. "Well, it looks like a rat-catcher's shed," he said. "Benches, chairs, stove, lots of rat skins hanging up, piles of old traps, a couple of dog muzzles, rolls of wire netting, considerable evidence of a lack of any dusting ever been done. It's what I'd have expected a rat-catcher's hut to look like inside." "I was expecting something horrible yet interesting," said Militia. "Some ghastly clue." "Does there have to be a clue?" said Keith. "Of course," said Militia, looking under a chair. "Look, Cat, there's two types of people in the world. There are those who have got the plot and those who haven't." "The world hasn't got a plot," said Maurice. "Things just happen, one after another." "Only if you think of it like that," said Militia, far too smugly in Maurice's opinion. "There's always a plot. You just have to know where to look." She paused for a moment and then said, "Look, that's the word. There'll be a secret passage, of course. Everyone look for the entrance to the secret passage." How will we know it's the entrance to a secret passage?" said Keith, looking even more bewildered than normal. "What does a secret passage look like?" "Well, it won't look like one, of course." "Oh, well, in that case, I can see dozens of secret passages," said Maurice. "Doors, windows, that calendar from the Acme Poison Company, that cupboard over there, that rat hole, that desk, that—" "You're just being sarcastic," said Militia, lifting up the calendar and sternly inspecting the wall behind it. Actually, I was just being flippant," said Maurice. "But I can do sarcastic if you like." Keith stared at the long bench, which was in front of a window frosted with ancient cobwebs. Traps were piled up on it. All kinds of traps. And beside them were row upon row of battered old tins and jars with labels like "Danger, Hydrogen Dioxide," and "Rat Bane," and "Fire Gut," and "Polly Put a Kettle On, Extreme Caution," and "Rat Away," and "Killer Rat," and "Essence of Barbed Wire, Danger." And he leaned closer to look at this one. Sugar. There were a couple of mugs too, and a teapot. White and green and grey powder was scattered on the bench. Some of it had even fallen on the floor. "You might try to be some help," said Militia, tapping the walls. "Well, I don't know how to look for something that doesn't look like the thing I'm looking for," said Keith. "And they keep the poison right next to the sugar. And so many poisons." Militia stood back and brushed her hair out of her eyes. "This isn't working," she said. "I suppose there just might not be a secret passage," said Maurice. "I know it's a rather daring idea, but perhaps this is just an ordinary shed." Even Maurice leaned back a little from the force of Militia's stare. "There has to be a secret passage," she said. "Otherwise there's no point." She snapped her fingers. "Of course, we're doing it wrong. Everyone knows you never find the secret passage by looking for it. It's when you give up and lean against a wall that you inadvertently operate the secret switch." Maurice looked at Keith for help. He was a human after all. He should know how to deal with something like Militia. But Keith was just wandering around the shed staring at things. Militia leaned against the wall with incredible nonchalance. There was not a click. A panel in the floor did not slide back. "Probably the wrong place," she said. "I'll just rest my arm innocently on this coat hook." A sudden door in the wall completely failed to happen. "Of course, it'd help if there was an ornate candlestick," said Militia. "They're always a surefire secret passage lever. Every adventurer knows that." "There isn't a candlestick," said Maurice. "I know. Some people totally fail to have any idea of how to design a proper secret passage," said Militia. She leaned against another piece of wall, which had no effect whatsoever. "I don't think you'll find it that way," said Keith, who was carefully examining a trap. "Oh, I won't I?" said Militia. "Well, at least I'm being constructive about things. Where would you look if you're such an expert?" "Why is there a rat hole in a rat-catcher's shed?" said Keith. "It smells of dead rats and wet dogs and poison. I wouldn't come near this place if I was a rat." Militia glared at him. Then her face wrapped itself in an expression of acute concentration, as if she were trying out several ideas in her head. "Yes," she said, "that usually works in stories. It's often the stupid person who comes up with the good idea by accident." She crouched down and peered into the hole. "There's a sort of little lever," she said. "I'll just give it a little push." There was a clonk under the floor. Part of it swung back, and Keith dropped out of sight. "Oh, yes," said Militia. "I thought something like that would probably happen." Mr. Clicky bumped along the tunnel, making a whirring noise. Young rats had chewed his ears, and his string tail had been chopped off by a trap, and other traps had dented his body, but he had this advantage. Surprise traps couldn't kill Mr. Clicky because he wasn't alive, and he wasn't alive because he was powered by clockwork. His key whirred around. A stub of candle burned on his back. The rest of the number 1 trap squad watched. "Any minute now," said Dark Tan. There was a snap, and a sound best described as gloink. The light went out. Then a gear wheel rolled slowly back down the tunnel and fell over in front of Ham and Pork. "I thought the soil looked a bit disturbed there," said Dark Tan in a satisfied voice. He turned around. "OK, lads, break out the other Mr. Clicky, and I want half a dozen of you with a rope to dig out that trap and drag it out of the way." "All this testing the ground is slowing us down, Dark Tan," said Ham and Pork. "Fine, sir," said Dark Tan as the squad hurried past him. "You go on ahead. That'd be a good idea, because we've only got one Mr. Clicky left. I hope this town's got a pet shop." I just think we should move faster." "OK, off you go then, sir. Try to shout out where the next trap is before it gets you." "I am the leader, Dark Tan." Yes, sir, I'm sorry. We're all getting a bit tired." "This is not a good place, Dark Tan," said Ham and Pork wearily. "I've been in some bad Urpeltult holes, and this is worse than any of them." "That's true, sir. This place is dead." "What's that word Dangerous Beans invented?" "Evil," said Dark Tan, watching the squad drag the trap out of the wall of the tunnel. He could see mangled springs and wheels in the jaws. He added, "I couldn't quite understand what he was going on about at the time, but now I think I can see what he meant." He looked back along the tunnel to where a candle flame burned and grabbed a passing rat. "Peaches and Dangerous Beans are to stay right back, understand?" he said. "They are not to come any further." "Right, sir," said the rat and hurried away. The expedition moved forward, cautiously, as the tunnel opened up into a large old drain. It had a trickle of water in the bottom. There were ancient pipes in the roof of it. Here and there steam hissed from them. Weak green light came from a street grating further down the drain. The place smelled of rats. It smelled freshly of rats. In fact, there was a rat in there, nibbling at a tray of food that had been set on a crumbling brick. It glanced at the changelings and fled. "Get after it!" Ham and Pork yelled. "No!" shouted Dark Tan. A couple of rats who'd begun to chase the Kiki hesitated. "That was an order I gave!" roared Ham and Pork, turning on Dark Tan. The trap expert made a very brief crouch and said, "Of course, but I think the view of Ham and Pork in possession of all the facts will be a little different than the view of Ham and Pork who just shouted because he saw a rat run away. Sniff the air." Ham and Pork's nose wrinkled. "Poison?" Dark Tan nodded. "Grey number 2, he said. "Foul stuff. It's best to keep well away." Ham and Pork looked both ways along the pipe. It went on for a long way and was just about high enough for a human to crawl along. Lots of smaller pipes hung near the ceiling. "It's warm here." "Yes, sir. Peaches has been reading the guidebook. Hot springs of water come up out of the ground here and they pump it around to some of the houses." "Why?" "To bath in, sir." Ham and Pork didn't like that idea. A lot of the young rats were keen on taking baths. Dark Tan turned to the squad. "Ham and Pork wants that poison buried and riddled on and a marker on it right now." Ham and Pork heard a metallic sound beside him. He turned and saw that Dark Tan had drawn from his web of tools a long, thin piece of metal. "What the kirk is that?" he said. Dark Tan swished the thing backwards and forwards. I got the stupid-looking kid to make this for me," he said. And then Ham and Pork realised what it was. "That's a sword," he said. "You got the idea out of Mr. Bunsey as an adventure." "That's right. Never believed in that stuff," Ham and Pork grumbled. "But a spike is a spike," said Dark Tan calmly. "I think we're close to the other rats. It'd be a good idea if most of us stay here, sir." Ham and Pork felt he was being given orders again, but Dark Tan was being polite. "I suggest that a few of us go on ahead and sniff them out," Dark Tan went on. "Sardines would be useful, and I'll go, of course." "And me," said Ham and Pork. He glared at Dark Tan, who said, "Of course."